We'll call this afternoon's meeting of the Capital District Transportation Authority to order. We have an exciting day planned besides the normal business that we do every month at CDTA's board meeting. Some special recognitions for long-term, long-standing board members, and some upcoming young executives within CDTA who we want to recognize for their participation in some leadership programs. So we do have a quorum. Thank you all for being here. Are there any additions to the agenda? Hearing none, the agenda will stand as approved as written. The minutes from the September 27th board meeting are in our packets and run from pages 2 through 16, sorry. Any additions, corrections, alterations of minutes? Can I have a motion to accept the minutes? Second. Regent and Mr. Sporan, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes are approved as written. Thank you. And going back to the agenda, could I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda, please?
Second.
All right. Motion, Ms. Nugent. Second, Ms. Figueroa. Any discussion on the agenda? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Agenda is approved. Thank you. So our recognitions today. Want to go back to our award. At least one more time. We were, several of us had the opportunity to be in Atlanta earlier this month to accept this beautiful award on behalf of CDTA, and I'm not going to pick it up for fear that I'll drop it. They wouldn't be happy with me if they had to replace it. So, but many of you already know this, but CDTA was named the 2017 Best Midsize Transportation System in North America. We made a public announcement on August 15th, and a group of us did recently return from APTA's annual meeting in Atlanta to accept the award that you see here today. It was with such a sense of pride to be joined by fellow board members and CDTA staff to accept the award. As part of the event, APTA put together a 1-minute video for each award winner. We wanted you all to have the opportunity to see the video that was presented the day of the award. Yes.
I didn't know if it was the.
I started to touch that. Realize. Not qualified.
Transportation Authority is a progressive and innovative company changing the way people think about transit in New York's capital. The Capital District Transportation Authority is a progressive and innovative company changing the way people think about transit in New York's capital region. CDTA has focused on making transit easier for customers to use, while highlighting its role in supporting economic development across its 4-county service area. CDTA has improved its service network, raising ridership to record levels, reducing operating costs, and sharpening its community image. This work includes innovative projects like upstate New York's first bus rapid transit service, Navigator Smart Card and Mobile Payment System, a successful Universal Access Ridership Program, and a new regional bike share. The CDTA Board of Directors has set a vision, and the company's nearly 700 employees are committed to creating a successful business and making thoughtful decisions to improve CDTA's bottom line and service to its communities. So come take a ride with CDTA, APTA's 2017 Mid-Size Public Transit System of the Year.
Thank you, Chris. So the video is kind of a succinct picture for us, but it paints the picture beautifully of how and why we won this national award. Being named the best mid-size system of the year by the American Public Transportation Association is the icing on the cake for CDTA, for our board of directors, and for the great people who work here. It is also a great achievement for our region, for our business partners and government leaders, and for developers and others who work so hard to make this a great place to live and work. It is CDTA's award, but it belongs to everyone in the capital region because we don't do it alone. We don't do the work alone. Everything we do involves collaboration and partnership with individuals, business, government leaders throughout our region. I'm proud of our board, I'm proud of our staff, I'm proud of the accomplishment that we've made, and unfortunately it makes it tougher to see what's next for us, because it's tough to top being the best, but we're going to have to work hard to do that, and I'm sure we will. You are the reason that the best mid-size system in North America is CDTA, and there is much more to come over the next several months as we enjoy our time in the spotlight with this award. So thank you all. And next up, we have a couple of recent graduates from the Public Transit Leadership Institute who spent their past year working in a mentoring program, a leadership program that is sponsored by New York Public Transit Association. We all struggle in the transit industry and actually across other areas of employment with workforce development. And this is one thing that NIPTA is trying to do in order to afford the opportunity to people who are interested in growing through the ranks of public transit to see what executive leadership looks like, and to give them an opportunity to participate firsthand with executive directors and other executive leaders in the transit industry. Carm is actually one of the mentors of the program, but I had the opportunity to be at the NIPTA conference, and the graduates were recognized. We have two 2017 graduates from CDTA who are with us today. I believe this is the third year that NIPTA sponsored the program, so we've got I think I counted a total of 5 graduates altogether.
This makes 6 graduates.
6 graduates.
We also
in 3
have our
years.
class of 18 with us.
Excellent. So Carm?
Yeah, I'll introduce them. As they said, this is a peer-to-peer program. They meet at least monthly, and they meet with people just like them from across the state. So in addition to the career ladder, we're building a network of people who can rely on each other to promote transit, to understand transit, and to get better at what we do. So this year's graduates are Dan Holdsworth and Patricia Cooper. They both work in the finance department. Somehow they work with Phil Perella and Mike Collins. And Mike and Phil, all joking aside, I think have given them plenty of professional rope in order to get better. But I also wanted to introduce the class of 2018, the new class who's just beginning their journey. And it is a journey. They spend a lot of time traveling the state and getting to learn the various functions of transit. Stephanie Bella-Kapitsky. I got it right, Steph.
You did.
Stephanie Bella-Kapitsky. Steph is HR manager. She works with Kelly and Mike Collins on HR initiatives. And Mike Williams, better known as Mike the intern. Mike is our senior planner. He started here as an intern. I called him Mike the intern when he was an intern, and he and I have sort of have continued it. But Mike does a lot of the behind-the-scenes work that you see in the Ross Farrell, Chris Desney presentations. Actually, all the number crunching, most often, is traced back to Mike. But I also wanted to introduce our first group. This would be the class of 16. Gary Guy, superintendent in Schenectady. Gary is responsible for the operation of the Schenectady division. Jamie knows him quite well. We do everything from deploying service to moving poles in the street that are in the way of progress. Joe Landy is not with us today. Joe is superintendent here in the Albany division. He runs the Albany division operation. And Rich Nassau, who is assistant superintendent of maintenance, works for Lynn Zarcone. Right now, his assignment is in Troy, but Rich is a 20-plus year guy. Another one of the people here at CDTA who's done just about everything, and is darn good at just about everything. So those are our 8 or 9 people who did I miss? Dave. Jeez, Dave. No, I'm in trouble. I'm in trouble, Dave.
Don't worry, I'll forget it.
Dave Williams, another maintenance superintendent. Dave came to us a short time ago, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. Seems like yesterday. But came to us as a highly skilled diesel technician and has grown through the ranks here very, very quickly. And we're putting his technical expertise to use throughout the maintenance department. So you can see maintenance, operations, HR, finance. We're trying to run the gamut here. Because the leaders of tomorrow, you don't know exactly where the leaders of tomorrow are going to come from. These are all people who, when we're not around any longer, my prediction is they're going to be running transit systems either here or elsewhere. And that's really what we're trying to do, develop the skills of our people to run transit systems here or elsewhere. So we're really proud of that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You know, the workforce development stuff in our industry is truly challenging, as I said earlier, and there are a number of, New York Public Transit is trying to do this within New York State. APTA has an APTA leadership program that accepts applicants for a similar program, but at the national level. I participate in a training that's put on for upcoming maintenance executives through the National Training Institute out of Rutgers, New Jersey. So Steve Bland and I have done a sort of a board chair CEO presentation as the opening session in those training conferences, basically to just let maintenance executives know what boards and CEOs are looking for maintenance. What we do with the data, how you can present to boards and CEOs and those kinds of things. So it's good that this training is going on because it's a great opportunity for people who desire to grow through the ranks to have an opportunity to create peer-to-peer relationships and be mentored by people who've been through the process. So can't do enough of it right now, I don't think.
If I could add one thing in my experience as a mentor, what I've learned, it's another thing that makes CDTA unique. When you talk to the people from the other systems, there is very little interaction between staff and board. Very little interaction. What we have here, and we're proud of it, sort of this open exchange of ideas between board and staff all the time. This doesn't happen in other systems. Other systems, oftentimes, this chief executive officer and 1 or 2 senior staff, council usually go to the board meetings, no one else. So it makes sometimes for somewhat of a closed society, so to speak. Same type of business gets exchanged, but we encourage this so that if a board member wants to ask a question directly to maintenance, he or she can. I think it makes our board better, but it was very interesting talking to some of the people in Rochester or Syracuse. There's very little of this. I'm not saying that we're right or they're wrong. It's just a different approach to how we do things.
Do they all go through different transit systems
Lots of tours. Lots of tours.
for a month or?
Oh, no.
It's a whole year. It's a whole year program. So it started, and the new class started with last week with the NIPTA conference. And as Carm said, they'll do probably at least monthly interactions. Some of it is tours, some of it is discussion, webinars.
But do any of our people go like up to Rochester for a month?
About a month.
You know, we can't afford to lose people for a month, nor could, our JRTA. These are short, succinct times, but really encouraging is information sharing. For Dan to call his counterpart in Buffalo, and for his counterpart to call him and say, how do you handle this? What's going on? I know as a young professional here, I was encouraged to do it. It wasn't a formal program. I learned a lot of stuff from talking to people in Syracuse, Rochester, Buffalo, New York City, Poughkeepsie, wherever it might be. Forget the state codes.
All right, on to the formality piece before we get to the end and celebrate some more. Ms. Figueroa, Performance Oversight Committee reports.
Thank you. The Performance Oversight Committee met last week here at the headquarters, once in Watervliet. And we have several consent agenda items. The first one being an award for a contract for shelter glass. In an effort to project a positive image, maintain our assets, and provide a clean and secure environment for customers to wait for buses, we hold a number of contracts to assist in cleaning, maintenance, and replacement of bus shelters. We issued an invitation to bid for glass replacement, provision for specifications, installation, and billing requirements. 7 companies downloaded the package, and 1 contractor submitted a bid, Provincial Contractor Services LLC of Castleton. Provincial is the incumbent contractor, and we have found their service over the past 5 years to be satisfactory. Their bid reflects no increase from their current pricing. At this time, we need a motion to award a single source contract for 3 years with 2 one-year options for shelter glass replacement to Provincial Contractor Services LLC of Castleton, New York, in the amount not to exceed $41,678 per year.
I have a motion awarding a single bid contract for bus shelter glass replacement and resolution number 60 on page 17.
Motion.
Mr. Kishon,
Second.
Mr. Sporana, thank you. Discussion on the resolution?
Is this on an as-needed basis? Or,
Yes. Yeah.
so if there's a broken glass, it's not a preventative maintenance thing? You just don't go out and change it just
There may be
because?
some of that too. If Mark's people feel that something is deteriorated, needs to be replaced, we'll replace it. It's glass, but glass has to be, whether it's preventative or something smashed. Or a car runs into it. Happens often.
Yeah.
Often.
Any other questions or discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution is carried. Thank you.
Okay, the next is an award for a contract for tire leasing. Like many other transit systems, CDTA leases tires for the revenue fleet. An invitation for bids was issued for a vendor to provide leased tires for the fixed route fleet, including tires to purchase on paratransit vehicles. Fixed monthly fee was also requested for the services of a tire technician employed by the vendor to work on site. CDTA provided estimated quantities, mileages, and other details to allow for informed bids. A single bid was received from Bridgestone Firestone and is deemed to be responsive by staff. Staff has also determined that the solicitation was fair and open. CDTA has a long and positive relationship in Bridgestone Firestone dating back to 1936 with the United Traction Company. At this time, we need a motion to award a 5-year contract to Bridgestone Firestone of Nashville, Tennessee for a radial tire lease and services for a minimum 5-year value of $2,380,000. Actual mileage will determine final costs.
And motion on resolution number 61 awarding a contract for radial tires.
So moved.
Motion, Mr. Sporana, thank you.
Second.
Second, Mr. Lahut, thank you. Discussion on the resolution?
This doesn't include our tow trucks.
Actually, it does. The tow truck has the same radial tire that our buses have, so we incorporated that later on.
But our supervisor vehicles, that's just
No,
as
no.
needed.
That's as needed. Correct.
Doesn't include stock.
It does include,
It does.
They're just purchased tires.
But we purchased them, that's what it was. Sorry.
Mark?
It says, whereas it's been determined that it's in the best interest to lease tires for mixed route vehicles and purchase tires for paratransit vehicles. What was the rationale for that?
Well, the industry, majority industry leases tires for, basically that way, leases the fixed route tires, and then they purchase the smaller paratransit tires. It's just an industry standard that we found that seems to be the best. It's worked for us. We've been that way from as far as I can remember.
And I guess it would stabilize costs, make them predictable.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Very predictable.
Based on miles.
And I believe the tire cost today is less than it was 5 years ago for the paratransit vehicles. So we saw a slight decrease, which is good.
We also talked about the fact that the technician is actually housed right here at CDTA. So, this includes basically another employee that is available to, take care of the replacements immediately.
Absolutely. Yeah, they work Monday through Friday during the day shift
Can you
hours.
explain that process, Lance? What happens, what does that person do?
So the tire technician for Bridgestone Firestone dismounts the actual wheel from the rim and then mounts the new wheel. And then our technicians come over and grab that wheel and tire combo and install it on the vehicle. And the miles are calculated daily and calculated and captured in our maintenance software in Spirit. And then at the end of the month, I'll run a report of all the vehicles been fixed through and provide that, look it over, and then provide that to Bridgestone Firestone. That's how they're calculated. Miles are calculated and the cost.
Since 1936.
Maybe not in software in 19.
No.
I don't think there's any software.
Calculator,
Any other questions? All in favor? Any opposed? Resolution's carried. Thank you.
Okay, our next contract award is for bus schedule printing. Bus schedules are an integral part of the CDTA public information system, and the availability, accuracy, and quality of schedules is critical to excellent customer service. An invitation for bids was issued for the production of the schedules. Staff provided sample layouts, sizes, and estimated annual quantities to obtain pricing. The pricing structure was based on schedule size and the number of schedules to be printed in each batch or gang. The 28 firms downloaded the solicitation and 4 submitted bids. At this time, we need a motion to award a 3-year contract for 2 optional 1-year renewals, with 2 optional 1-year renewals to the incumbent provider Digital Express, a New York State WBE firm of Albany, New York, for an amount not to exceed $90,000 per year.
Could I have a motion on resolution number 61, awarding a contract for bus schedule printing?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Sparana, second Ms. Figueroa, thank you. Discussion on the resolution, Mark?
As somebody who regularly rides the bus system, I have a very strong opinion about bus schedule design, which is specifically that in low light, moving bus, etc., the schedules listing the rows are sometimes hard to follow the row column intersection. And as somebody who is no slouch at reading tables and so forth, I sometimes make mistakes. So I strongly recommend, this is something that I noticed in Washington, D.C. when I was there. Their bus system had a grid with rows and columns in lines. And I strongly recommend that be specified in the next contract.
Well, why don't we, let's have our people look at that whoever prints it, we can make, yeah,
Right, I was,
yeah, we don't need
It
a
doesn't need to be in the
contract.
contract.
We can make whatever changes to design, we desire.
Thank you, Mark. Any other discussion, questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution is carried, thank you.
Thank you. The audit committee items, we had a report from Sarah Montrose, provided the internal audit monthly report. Work completed included wrapping up the compliance portion of the drug and alcohol audit with no material findings. Work in progress included starting the audit plan for the external vendor portion of the drug and alcohol audit. Sarah will be attending internal controls training in the next several weeks. Thank you, Sarah. The investment committee report has been amended. Administrative discussion items, we had an update on the new LARC in Washington Station. Chris had a great drone presentation of the route. Drone presentation, yes. He droned. This project is considered a subcomponent of the Washington Western BRT and is being progressed in advance of our small star submission. The goals of the project are to improve the safety of intersection and enhance the efficiency of bus routing around the area. The scope, funding sources, major capital components and status were discussed. The new station is scheduled to be open in the spring of 2018. And anybody has any questions, I'm sure Chris can provide additional details on that. Any questions on that?
Mark?
Just again, one design consideration, I've raised this before, but before it's built, the obelisks that identify the station are currently in between the station and the incoming buses, which interferes with visibility. And I would strongly prefer that they be downstream from the station so that people have a clear view of incoming buses and identify the direct bus.
And I think I know you brought that up before, Mark, so to the extent we can, we will, but some of the issue for us is land constraint. We need to work out those arrangements with the property owners, and we don't always own the property, so that sometimes is the challenge with that, but to the extent we can, we certainly will. Thank you.
Any other questions for Chris? Okay, then we had the monthly financial report. Mike Collins gave the mid-year report. Mortgage recording tax was down 1%, and customer fares are down 3% as we continue to transition to Navigator. The rental rail station revenue is also down 5%. Some of that I believe we attributed to the parking garage
And the vast
the work construction going on down there, so hopefully that will level off. Wages and health benefits are below budget. We budgeted for 20 operators, and as we catch up with the onboarding activities, overtime continues to decrease. There is a budgeted 2% increase in wages on January 1st. Workers' compensation and liability claims are over budget due to an increase in loss of use awards and property damage claims, respectively. And we are in a satisfactory cash flow position at this time. Mike did indicate that we may need to temporarily draw down on our line of credit as we wait for the next round of state payments. I don't know if anybody has any questions for Mike related to the financial. He's here. He's not here. The room is so full I can't see it.
Is that,
Oh,
I
okay.
just want to commend the board.
Yeah.
You know, a few months ago, we came to you with actually several months ago, we came to the concept of a line of credit. It's proving to be very, very valuable as, you know, the ebb and flow of payments. Sometimes they're on time, sometimes they're not on time, sometimes things get held up. You pay for, obviously, you pay for the amount that you borrow when it's out, but it makes running the business so much easier, so much more efficient. I think the cost is far outweighed by the convenience of managing the operation. So hats off to the board for being progressive and thinking.
And finally, Chris Desney gave the non-financial report. Total fixed ridership was down 4.5% for the month and down 1% year to date. Star ridership was down 9% for the month. On-time performance was 71%, and there were 0 PMIs not on time. Missed trips were at 41 this month, and the mean distance between service interruptions was 20,431 miles. So scheduled work was at 83%. There were 19 preventable and 33 non-preventable accidents. And 95% of customer complaints were closed within 10 days. Website page views were at 1,032,779. And without, if there are any questions?
Any questions for Denise?
The star ridership being down 9% is not the number of people, but the number of trips. Because we're starting to,
Fred, we're up the,
It's right over there. I know, it's very crowded. Can't find people.
continues to get more people on the same.
Consolidate.
yeah, we're, again, going through some consolidation. And what we've seen, pardon me, sorry, what we've seen was a shift in ridership. We had companions and other riders that ride along with our star riders. That number has started to go down, but the actual star riders, the clients, is going up. And they're not doing it in equal amounts, so it's kind of up and down. We're kind of even across the board.
But generally, that's a good thing.
It's very good. Yes. Very good.
And on the fixed route side, we're basically level for the year, but we have these month-to-month fluctuations. And the reason for the decrease this year, believe it or not, the Jewish holiday last year, let's get this right, was in October.
October.
And this year was in September. That's about a day's worth of ridership that sort of kind of isn't there, or in one month and not the other. So that's how close we are. We're basically level. And these fluctuations, whether they be holidays or weather, are causing enough agita within the system. We prefer to be going this way to eliminate.
As you said, month to month fluctuates. 9% drop in star ridership is a lot. Month to month, what is it year to date?
Year to date, I can tell you in a second. Year to date ridership is down almost 1%. So again,
So it's basically about what's better, an artifact.
and you know, we have these. I have been trained by staff to not look at this every single day. I do look at it every single day. I just don't ask them questions because I'm tired. But you have so much fluctuation day to day, month to month. You know, you really have to look at this in 3-month blocks compared to 3 months to last year. It bounces around for a lot, as Mike Williams said, for a lot of reasons that are just interesting, at least to us transit kids, whether it be holidays, a bad weather day, a snow day, for example. Our daily ridership is about 60,000, 58, 60, 62. That's our total number of boardings on the fixed route side of the day. We have a snow day, it drops to
30s, I think. It's either
30s. So contrary to popular belief, especially in the media, our ridership does not go up when the weather is bad. It goes down because our riders, just like everyone else, are going to work. So they don't go to work. They stay home. It snows.
That actually happened this month. There was a day with almost 2 inches of rain. And the day to day, the way we calculate the day over day compared to the previous year was down like 13%. On that day.
So if we have a lot of nice weather, if we had a winter a couple of years ago, not last winter, the winter before, record-breaking, no snow. That was part of our record-breaking ridership. One of the reasons. Good weather, people come out, do service.
Thank you. Governance Committee reports. Governance Committee met on Thursday, October 19th. Lisa Morello provided us with an update on advocacy efforts. She and her team are preparing for the next legislative session, which begins in January. A $4 billion deficit is projected for New York State, and agencies have been instructed to hold the line on spending, which will make it a challenging environment for advocating for more dollars. Lisa advised that she and her team met with Mike Perrin and Ali Chaudhry from the governor's office. Mike is the Deputy Director of State Operations, and Ali is the Deputy Secretary for Transportation. Both are familiar with CDTA and aware of our initiatives. They were complimentary about CDTA's help with the State Fair Service, and our efforts are appreciated. During the meeting, they talked about the things that CDTA has accomplished in a short period of time, as well as being responsive to economic development issues that are happening in our region. They also talked about operating assistance, sustainability planning, and long-term funding for capital needs. Lisa advised us that the governor may call back the legislature in December to address federal cuts, particularly in the area of health care. The Assembly met on October 18th for an organizational meeting, and the Assembly Speaker indicated that he did not believe it would be necessary for his House to return. Lisa advised that over the past few years, the governor has incorporated a lot of policy into his budget, and he will likely do the same again this year, and that we need to be aware of his priorities. We spoke about the calendar adjustment for December, so our committee meetings will be on December 6th and 7th instead of a week later as they were originally scheduled, and the board meeting will be on Wednesday the 13th instead of the 20th. We also updated the governance committee and spoke about the upcoming board retreat, November 8th and 9th. Doug had at that point had most of his one-on-one phone calls with board members and finished them up last week. The leadership team, which was Denise, Georgie, Joe, Carm, and I, along with Doug, had a phone call yesterday to review the agenda retreat, and we will be getting a memo out to the board on the schedule of events for November 8th shortly. And Jamie's been very helpful to us in navigating through this process. The retreat will include board and senior staff, and the governance committee will meet the following day in order to do some more directed initiatives at the governance committee level. Our next meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, December 7th at 11:30 a.m. here at 110 Watervliet. Questions? All right.
Just quickly, first, bullet point, it says 4 billion, when it reads 4 billion big.
I think I said billion. I saw that too, Mark. I didn't think we'd worry about a rounding error, so I caught that. Thank you.
That's my mistake.
That's still very uncertain. It depends to some extent what happens with the federal budget. Yes.
Thank you. Planning and Stakeholder Relations Committee report. Mr. Sperana.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I start, when anybody gets a chance to go over to the rail station, the new surface, it looks good. I wanted Mark to do it.
Listen, as the chief overseer, critic, and genuine helper, I appreciate that. Well, you've been mild. You've been helpful. It's good. Constructive. You've been very helpful to us.
Buy that?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I don't know if Mark buys that. Joe has been very helpful. Joe has been on site. He has sort of put his money where his mouth is on this one. He's been very helpful to us. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, now for the planning and stakeholder. I started off with a Gatsby 45, but I got shotted down because of okay. Item number 1, Mike Collins provided a mid-year update on our fiscal 2018 budget. In general, we're in a good position with revenue ahead of expenses at this point. After 6 months, we have a positive budget variance of $700,000. That's a flexible number that just goes up and down. And
Well, I think, again, I don't know what's in your report, because I haven't read your report, but Mike indicated that while that looks good, the second half could be a little more closer to budget, because we've got raises that go into play in the second half of the year, and we've got some other costs that kind of backload in the fiscal year, so I apologize if I took away your comments.
no, he did say that, and I forgot.
I didn't want you to present our picture as too rosy, Joe.
3 revenue categories are under budget for the year: mortgage tax, customer fares, and Rensselaer Railroad Station parking revenue. They're all pretty self-explanatory. Didn't need anybody has a question, feel free to ask. The committee had a good discussion about customer fares and the transition from our current fare products to Navigator. This is causing the lag in customer fare line. We will continue to talk about this in an upcoming meeting. And it's generally because we're switching cards. We're getting some in return and some are going out. And again, this is going to be a fluctuating thing for another 6 months or whatever.
And just to add, I think the committee expressed a desire to have sort of a regular placeholder discussion, maybe a way to track this separately, because it's going to continue for several months. It's going to take a while for our customers and our vendors. For example, Price Chopper sells a good amount of product, so they have been turning in large numbers of swiper cards. We're booking the value, and then we're transitioning to the Navigator. So it's going to continue for a while. It's almost all of it is responsible for the 3% drop in customer revenue. So we're going to keep an eye on it and have regular discussions at the time.
It's within the realm of when we went from cash to cards to different cards. Progressive spending or whatever. Okay, expenses are under budget by 2%. Most of this is wage and benefit lines, as our chairman said. The committee reviewed a high-level budget project for next fiscal year. Projection, I'm sorry. Chris Desney provided an update on property acquisition for the River Corridor Transit Center in downtown Troy. Unfortunately, the next step includes holding public hearings to begin eminent domain process. We will obtain detailed appraisals of the property that will allow us to provide an offer of fair market value for the parcels we need to do the project. This leads to acquire property rights around the Uncle Sam atrium. At this time, the committee recommends that we advance a public hearing schedule for the acquisition of property in and around the Uncle Sam atrium in Troy for the transit center.
I have a motion on resolution number 63, authorizing a public hearing for Uncle Sam land acquisition.
So moved. Second.
Mr. Brisky, second Mr. Schaefer. Discussion on the resolution. We had a fair amount of discussion in committee, so we don't move to this action very lightly or very easily. So any questions that anyone has?
How do you follow through on getting an appraisal? Is it a normal procurement process?
Yes, it is. We actually get quotes for the appraisals, and the appraisals are very, very specific in terms of the language and what needs to be included in there to be compliant with this federal regulation that's cited in the memo. We've actually already done that. They need to be updated because they're a little dated, but we already have prior appraisals. Those will be updated. There's another level of a review appraisal after that, so that's all lined up.
So which firm prepared that appraisal?
Pardon?
Which firm prepared the appraisal?
Well, our real estate consultant is RK Height, and it's either them or somebody acting on behalf of them. I think they do the review. Like one firm does the actual appraisal and Height does the review, or vice versa. I forget which. But RK Height is the lead on coordinating all that stuff, as well as developing the property tax maps and all the other documentation that's outlined in the table here.
And does this entail an actual taking of the space? Or just breaking the lease, or
Taking space.
just taking space from the owner?
Not inside the garage. It's 99% of it is outside, sidewalk out front, as well as the alley between the hotel and the backside of the garage.
And who provides the legal representation to CDTA?
Well, obviously Amanda is involved in this process as well, but as far as the attorney of record that's actually going to be filing these documents, it's an attorney that is with RK Height as well.
We'll see where this goes. This is the first step in the process.
Generally, nobody wins when you do this.
We've attempted to do this sort of traditionally, run into some issues. We may still end up doing it traditionally. It's probably our hope that we do it traditionally. But we need to start this process because we have funding partners who are now asking us, where are you on this project? When is this going to happen? We've been discussing this for 3 years. So I see this as a necessary push to the process.
I think it's important to know, like we said at the committee, there was a lot of discussion about this. And you never know what's going to happen in a big project like this, but this is an important project for us at CDGA. It'd be our first transit center. It's important for Troy, and we are a year behind on this. We could be breaking or having a ceremony probably next month on this if everything had went according to plan. So I brought it up from employee relations side, as we have operators in that area, that don't have access to good bathrooms, and this is part of the resolution of that, and we're a year behind on it. So I think it's important that we look at all options to make sure we get important projects like this moving forward.
And we're it's, 3 years and 1 year have been mentioned, but it was almost 2 years ago that we did a media event with the owner announcing the project. So it's been 2 years just trying to negotiate. We've had to change the scope of the project because we originally were anticipating a project that would be partially inside the garage. And now we're looking at something that's a different design, smaller. We'll still accomplish what our needs are for having a transit center there, but it's been a lot of reworking on our end in order to try to make this work without touching the insides of the parking garage.
And procedurally or statutorily, on a board vote or eminent domain, is it a simple majority, is it a super majority, is there a change in the way normal business is undertaken? Majority, right?
Mark?
There is a fair prospect that the prospect of this process will induce a negotiated settlement. Dr. Samuel Johnson famously said, nothing concentrates the mind like the prospect, certain knowledge of what is to be hanged in a fortnight.
I can tell you that is already on.
I've had a lot of dealings with things like this with DOT, and that happens a lot. Everybody thinks they're going to get rich, and that doesn't happen.
And again, we don't normally pursue this path either. I mean, it's really that we don't have another option. It really isn't another viable option for a transit center in downtown Troy. I can only think of 2 occasions in the time I've been on the board that we've gone through this process and it required it. So, not something we do lightly at all. And we prefer not to do, given the option.
Yeah, I think you're all correct. I would label it as stay tuned.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Okay, the resolution is carried. Thank you.
Jonathan provided a summary about our plan to introduce a half-fare program for the Capital Region veterans. New York State Division of Veterans Affairs supports a concept to provide half-fare to the veteran community. 60,000 honorably discharged veterans live in our area. Our Navigator card will include a photograph and the veteran's marking on the back to ensure vetting, as well as the ability to report the number of veterans using our service. Details and promotion of this program will be announced shortly. At this time, the committee recommends providing honorably discharged veterans half-fare pricing on all CDTA buses, and I thank the staff for the work they've been doing for over a year. Get this, a year and a half probably. So,
The resolution on page 35, resolution 64.
Motion by Ms. Figueroa, second Ms. Nugent. Discussion on the resolution. You know, I just want to thank Joe. This is Joe's baby. I think it's been more time elapsed than you think because it took a little while longer than we thought to get the Navigator developed the way we wanted it to. And we had originally said we were going to tie this to the Navigator product. So, but good things happen even if it takes a little time to get them there. And I think this is a great thing to recognize our veterans for their distinguished service to our country. And there's a lot of initiatives to employ veterans, to make sure that we're taking care of them when they come back from doing their service to our country. So this is a small gesture, but I think a very noteworthy gesture, and I thank you for bringing it.
well, I bugged Carm and everybody for a year, and then I promised I wouldn't do it any longer.
It's okay.
But again, thanks everybody for that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution is carried. Thank you. I suspect we'll have more with Veterans Day quickly approaching.
Oh, yeah, that's the timing for our announcement.
So, perfect.
A friend of mine suggested picking up veterans and bringing them to there's a veterans dinner, but it's not a dinner, it's a drink fest. So, he says, I don't think you're gonna get a CDTA bus for that.
We'll decline.
The Planning and Stakeholder Relations Committee will host the annual board retreat at the Desmond Hotel and Conference Center on Wednesday, November 8th, beginning at 9 a.m. The next Planning and Stakeholder Relations Committee will be at 12 noon on Thursday, December 10th, here at the office. And that concludes my report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Joe. Any questions for Mr. Spurrier? Date? December 7th. December 7th.
December 7th, I'm sorry. I got November 7th stuck in my head.
All right, CEO's report, Mr. Basile.
Thank you, Mr. Stacko. My report is in your packets. The great thing about our governance structure is 8 chairs and the discussion is mentioned half of my report, so that's wonderful. Gets me off the hook. But our work to widen the mobility menu in the region continues. We are focused on economic opportunities, maybe providing those connections to economic opportunities, and that's sort of been the undying message, and incorporating the role of transit. Our designation, as you see around the room, best mid-sized transit system is part of that work. An example is the region's proposal. You may have followed this for the Amazon HQ2, their headquarters. We are a big part of that. We're a big part of the plan as our service will be integrated, it is integrated into the proposal. It doesn't take a cell job any longer. We are part of every discussion on making connections to economic opportunities. So if you get a chance, take a look at the region's proposal. You'll see CDTA prominently featured. At the same time, really throughout the organization, our company pride is at an all-time high. It's great to ride this wave, and we'll continue to do it. You may have noticed that all buses, all cars, trucks now have the black and gold logo. Designates are modeled down at the end of the table. Every employee was given one of those shirts, or will the next day or so if they don't have them already. We're asking them to wear it with pride. It's been incorporated into our uniform policies so that bus operators, maintenance and technicians, everyone can wear it, and more to follow. As Dave said, you only get one shot at this. And, being the best is a special designation. We want to make sure that everybody shares it. The financial condition, I think, has been well documented. The financial condition, though, comes from a lot of hard work. It doesn't happen by accident, and it happens because we take our fiduciary responsibility very seriously, and it's built on a bedrock, a foundation that goes back a number of years, and I'm proud of the work that the staff does to ensure that our budgets are rock solid. We're working with NIPTA on the broader infrastructure needs of transit systems across the state. As Dave said, Lisa Morello and her staff advocate for our particular needs, but we work closely with NIPTA to advocate for the whole industry in New York State, and we're really fine-tuning that message. I just got off a conference call where I listened to the needs of systems across the state. And it's not necessarily needs to fix broken systems; it's needs to expand progressive systems. And that's really been a change in the last several years. We all want to do more, but you can't do more if you don't have more. So we're working together with our brothers and sisters across the state. Good news, we hit 10,000 bike rides last week on the CDPHP cycle. Phenomenal success. The program is, I think, exceeded our expectations by a lot. We have more than 2,200 members who are signed up to the Bike Share Club. The program will go on winter hiatus at the end of November unless the weather stays the way it is. If the weather stays the way it is, we may have to change plans. But when it comes back in the spring, it will be double the size. 350 bikes, 50 or 60 stations. So that ridership chart will continue to go up. It's really been great to watch this program evolve. So thanks again to the board for taking a chance. We didn't have all the answers when we were planning this. Frankly, didn't have all the money to get it done. We said, trust us. We had our fingers crossed on it. I appreciate your support. We've also begun the process of getting that common taxi ordinance adopted. The first public hearing was last week in the city of Saratoga Springs. All went according to plan, basically, and will be in other communities over the next couple of months. We're aiming for by the first of the year to have every one of the 6 communities adopted the common ordinance or in the process of adopting it. We don't see any roadblocks, but it's a bureaucratic process that we have to go through because we have to get each community to adopt the ordinance. It has to be done by their legislative body, common council, board of people, or whatever. But all good. Just a lot of detailed work with your head down and getting it done. The construction updates, I think we got them all. The only thing that I would mention to you is we're about ready to switch over to our new Motorola radio system. if you get a minute, downstairs, just to the right here of the boardroom is our new control center. It's occupied right now only by one person. Fred Gilliam has his office in the corner, but it's not quite Star Trek-ish, but it's pretty close. So if you get a minute, stop in there and you'll see what our employees will have available to them when they populate that room in the next several weeks. We talk a lot about our giving spirit. Our employees, they just amaze me. Our United Way campaign is 5 years ago, our employee giving campaign was at $18,000. This year, we just concluded our employee giving campaign, and we are over $100,000. We were recognized at the United Way annual meeting as having one of the top giving campaigns in the region, both in terms of the total giving and the per capita giving. This is just an interesting way that our employees look at the community and living and working in the community. Just amazing stuff. At the same time, we're very involved in the Real Men Wear Pink campaign. Pink's everywhere in our organization, at least it will be till the 31st. I must say that I'm running out of pink. I have 31 days of wearing pink for a guy like me is not the easiest thing to do. But we're there. Hats off to Jamie Watson, who basically has become the agent of pink. Our pink bus, Lance and Dave and Rich and the whole gang, and they painted the bus pink. The bus now needs an agent. It is so popular. We usually have sometimes multiple requests in a day for organizations that want to use the bus. They want to be seen with the bus. They want to have their picture taken with the bus. We spent last Friday with students at Cohoes Middle School who organized the Real Kids Wear Pink campaign. It's just amazing. It's good to be involved in the community and to see CDTA so positively positioned. So hats off to everybody who's done. You're doing a great job. We also had our fall festival. You would think that you wonder if we work here. We do, but we try to have a little bit of fun at the same time. The fall festival open house. We had about 400 elementary school students come to our facility, and we gave them all a pumpkin and some giveaways. It had an educational component built in. We had a scarecrow contest. We had turned our paint booth into a haunted paint booth. It was really great, but the heartwarming stories are from the teachers of kids who go to school in the region, and they're just so thankful that they can come here. And the reason why they're so thankful is not only the great show that we put on, but we don't charge them anything. Because if we charge them anything, most of the kids can't go because they can't. Their family doesn't have or can't give them $1 or $2 to make the contribution. So, we have to be thankful for what we have and appreciate the work that we do for those who don't. I think the activity report is pretty self-explanatory. A couple of highlights. In the September, Dave, Georgie, and I and others, we had a media event up in Saratoga to talk about CDPHP cycle. We were joined by Brian O'Grady from CDPHP. I can tell you that the upper management at CDPHP is incredibly pleased with what we're doing with the program. And you may have noticed it is incorporated into all their branding, their commercials, their messaging. So I think we've hooked up with the right company. Mary Yepson was there talking about sustainability in the city of Saratoga. So all that's good. So kudos to our chairman. You know that he is now the vice chair of the APTA board. It is quite the undertaking. But I kind of got a glimpse of it. I was on a webinar where APTA is unveiling to the members the results of 2 years worth of work, really, to reorchestrate, reconstruct APTA, to make it more member-focused. And Dave, I know a little bit more than you all do, maybe not a lot. There's not too many weekends where he's not traveling to meetings. There are not too many days where he's not sharing a conference call on this work. And I listened to it, and they are on the right track. I think we're going to have a better APTA as a result of his leadership. We're just starting to scratch the surface because it all goes to plan. He will assume the chairmanship next year. So great work. I think we're headed in the right direction. Chris Desney and I met with representatives from the Gondola Group. That is still alive. The project, the Gondola, across the Hudson from the Rensselaer Rail Station to points in downtown Albany is still alive. We've agreed to keep talking. We're open-minded. It's another mobility choice. We don't know where it's going to go. We don't know how it's going to be funded. But I think agreeing to keep the conversation open is good. Just a note on the NIPTA Fall Conference. It was undoubtedly the best NIPTA conference I've been to. Dave joined us. Dave actually provided remarks about what's going on at NAPTA, what's going on in the industry. But it was really thought-provoking. The agendas were things like shared use mobility, leveraging data for decision-making, the work culture of tomorrow. That's stuff you usually get at the national level, not necessarily at the state level. So I'm very impressed that even here in New York, I think we're starting to understand the industry better and doing the right things. So thanks everybody. This is a great company filled with great people. None better than Dave Stackrow. The work he's doing on the national level, I think is not yet appreciated. So hats off to our chair. He has dedicated the last 22 years of his life to CDTA and has immersed himself in the transit industry. And I think a year or two from now, you're going to be very impressed with how we're all better off as a result. So congratulations, Dave. Well done.
A lot of pressure.
We have faith.
I think, to Carm's comment about some of the topics that were discussed at the NIPTA conference, Mike, Corey, Denise, and I had the opportunity as board members to attend the national conference. The sessions were very similarly themed. Our industry is better be poised, to embrace dramatic change. It's coming upon us, and if we're not willing to accept it, it's going to run us over. So some of the technology, there were autonomous vehicles on display. Two companies had autonomous vehicles at the APTA conference. You could hop on the vehicle and ride the vehicle. It had it was fully operational, but there's only so much you can do in a small, confined space. But one of the tests was for somebody to walk in front of the vehicle and have the vehicle actually know somebody was there. It stopped. Person moved out of the way. The vehicle continued on its path. So, but that's the kind of, again, whether it affects our industry, autonomous vehicles are not far away from being mainstreamed. And the cars, it's going to change the dynamic of what we do. In many people's beliefs, it's going to make us more important because that technology is not going to be accessible to a lot of people. So, while right now we have choice riders who choose transit, we have dependent riders, there's an opportunity to grow the space of what we do and become even more relevant as these new technologies come in. But we need to be willing to embrace them. And I know, Carm, here there's a lot that we're looking at, talking about, to make sure that we're poised to deal with whatever ends up coming our way. So I want to thank you for that, being very open to technological change. And Mike got his eyes full, I know, from walking the expo floor. Rick Vines was his tour guide, and thanks to Rick for that. But you saw an expo here. So the expo at APTA is once every 3 years, and it's 300,000 square feet of floor space for displays of everything transit. There's rail cars, there's buses, there's computer technology, there's sign displays, there's software products. So it's a great opportunity to see the things that as a board we may be asked to procure at some point in time. So thank you all for your ability to go. Hope you enjoy the trip. Without further ado, under good of the order, Mr. Young, as approved by me, We have two special recognitions for long-serving board members. Mr. Norm Miller served CDTA's board from 2006 through 2017, so 11 years of service for Mr. Miller. Norm and I had opportunity to have a lot of conversations about leadership development, Toastmasters. We have some friends in common up on Lake Champlain. And Norm, without much arm twisting, Norm asked me to be involved with him in a board, which was the Challenger Learning Center in Schenectady. And we had the opportunity to spend a lot of time together bringing that board forward with its project, as well as the time we've spent together at CDTA. So Norm, from my personal heart, I thank you for everything you've contributed to help me and to help us become what we are. And Mr. Young, 22 years of service. We met in Senate chambers as our resolutions were being read from the Senate floor. Hard to believe, 22 years, but you provided me personally and our board with a whole lot of counsel and wisdom with your background and experience. Can't thank you enough for all that you contributed. We would not be where we are without either of your contributions to the authority, and I thank you both. Carm has a couple of special resolutions that we want to read off, and that will be our final business before we adjourn to lunch and have an opportunity to socialize a little bit. Carm.
Thanks, Dave. That's it. These are hard because I've become sort of the designated resolution writer. Amanda writes all the business resolutions. I write these. It took a whole weekend, and not long, but I had to sort of get my thoughts together about these two guys. And I had a couple of helpers, Dave and a few other people, to sort of put this into a bunch of whereas. Because if we didn't do it that way, Mr. Young would be really upset with me. So for Mr. Miller, expressing thanks, farewell, and Godspeed. Jamie, is this the way you want it done? Jamie wants it? Okay. Godspeed to Norman L. Miller. Whereas Norman L. Miller has represented Schenectady County with much distinction as a board member of the Capital District Transportation Authority since June of 2006. And whereas Mr. Miller's 11-year tenure as a board member can be characterized by his thoughtfulness and collaborative approach to everything he did. And whereas Mr. Miller brought to the board a multitude of talents, which included 33 years of exemplary military service, his years as a coach for the United States Olympic bobsled team, his experience as an author, and his work as an organizational development specialist, executive leadership coach, and human resource professional. And whereas Mr. Miller used his talents and professional accomplishments to help guide CDTA projects and initiatives, it is his calm and professional demeanor that will long be remembered as the centerpiece of his contributions to CDTA. And whereas Mr. Miller's experience as a Princetown town judge added to his long list of professional accomplishments, he brought the practical side of the decision-making process to CDTA and helped people understand the need for rules, order, and consequences. And whereas Mr. Miller was the long-tenured chairman of the Planning and Stakeholder Relations Committee and was responsible for the development of meeting agendas that challenge board members and staff to look forward for CDTA and lay the foundation for so much of our success. And whereas Mr. Miller enthusiastically embraced the concepts of our transit development plan to foster improved services and effective delivery of a better route network that became the main reason for our record-breaking ridership totals. And whereas Mr. Miller's service as a trustee on the CDTS No. 1 and Amalgamated Transit Union Local 1321 pension plan was characterized by his genuine interest for the employees of CDTA and the development of a practical and fundable pension plan that will provide economic benefits to our employees for the remainder of their non-working lifetime. And whereas Mr. Miller brought to the board his many years of experience in the human resource and professional development disciplines that amplified his concern for people, their career needs and development of the human capital plan at CDTA. And whereas Mr. Miller was a passionate advocate for all the men and women who work at CDTA and their contributions to the success of CDTA. And whereas Mr. Miller provided wise and invaluable counsel and advice to board members and staff members alike. And whereas Mr. Miller's tenure on the CDTA Board of Directors has come to an end. Now therefore be it resolved that the board members, staff, and employees of the Capital District Transportation Authority fondly wish Godspeed and best wishes to Norman L. Miller as he completes his assignment in extraordinary record of public service. And be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution, in addition to being spread upon the minutes of the authority, be suitably framed and presented to Norman L. Miller.
Before you do that, I want to say something. I have the time. When I think personally of a state agency or a state authority, the term good leadership is not at the top of my mind. And I've always been amazed at this particular organization because of the leadership. The leadership at the top with Dave and Con is tremendous. But many agencies have good leadership at the top, and it stays there. This organization is blessed because it has worked down through senior staff to the staff to employees, and that's the real success for CDTA, and it's been a pleasure to be a part of it.
So I have a few more whereases for you. For Mr. Arthur F. Young, Jr. Whereas Arthur F. Young, Jr. has represented Albany County with much distinction as a board member of the Capital District Transportation Authority since October 1995. And whereas Mr. Young's nearly 22-year tenure makes him the second longest tenured board member in the history of our great company. You'll have to guess who number one is. And whereas Mr. Young served with distinction as treasurer of the CDTA Board of Directors for the last 19 years. And whereas Mr. Young's tenure as a board member was characterized by his unyielding commitment to his fiduciary responsibilities, his zealousness, and his devotion and dedication to CDTA. And whereas Mr. Young brought more than 50 years of banking and finance experience to the CDTA boardroom and generously shared his talents with fellow board members, staff, and all the employees of CDTA. And whereas Mr. Young dove headfirst into projects and initiatives that were developed by CDTA, most notably on budgeting, investments in audit, system and workplace safety, our bus safety replacement plan, reporting, and of course, post-employment benefits, aka GASB 45. And whereas Mr. Young was the longtime chairman of the Performance Oversight Committee and was responsible for the meeting structure, agenda development, and the reporting mechanisms that we use today. And whereas Mr. Young will be remembered for the creation of the internal audit position, but most importantly, he'll be remembered for the spirit of the audit function, which he insisted be cooperative, collaborative, collegial, and never with a hint of gotcha. And whereas Mr. Young was a reluctant supporter of the high-impact governance concept and tenets therein, over time he embraced and advocated for it, although he always maintained a distant affinity for its author and chief spokesperson. And whereas Mr. Young is an expert on parliamentarian procedures and Robert's Rules of Order, and he contributed this expertise to the operation of committee and board meetings, ensuring that CDTA business was always conducted with the highest integrity and professionalism. And whereas Mr. Young was a vocal advocate and supporter of the CDTA workforce and constantly pointed to their work as a critical component of any success that was achieved by the authority. And whereas Mr. Young provided wise and valuable counsel to all board members and any staff member whenever he was called upon. And whereas the board, the staff, and the authors of this resolution readily admit that there is not enough space on this paper or time at this meeting to fully acknowledge and recognize Mr. Young's talents and contributions to CDTA. And whereas Mr. Young's extraordinary tenure on the CDTA Board of Directors has come to an end, therefore be it resolved that the board members, the staff, and the employees of the Capital District Transportation Authority fondly wish Godspeed and best wishes to Arthur F. Young Jr. as he completes this assignment in outstanding record of public service. And be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution, in addition to being spread upon the minutes of the authority, be suitably framed and presented to Arthur F. Young Jr.
Speech that Norm just provided you with, I would like to say a couple of words. First of all, I'd like to congratulate Mike on his appointment to replace me on the board, and to again welcome the two Schenectady people. We've been long short of Schenectady representation, full representation of what Norm has represented Schenectady for, as you just heard, 11 whole years. The other thing I would just like to say is, having left the board, I found that I have a lot more free time to pursue some of my other endeavors. Some of you know I had an interest in genealogy, and I now can tell you that I have registered over 6,000 ancestors in my computer. And since I left the board, I actually have found 3 more great-grandfathers, which I had not known about. And this leads me into my pirate story, because in our family, we actually had a full-blown pirate that sailed with Captain Kidd. And I have to tell you and emphasize that he was not a grandfather, he was only an uncle. The interesting part of the story is, at one point in time, I found this plaque, a huge plaque, back in the library. In fact, it was in the New York City Library, and it talked about this family, and it talked about Robert, who was his father, and it talked about 2 of his 3 sons, but the plaque never mentioned the 3rd son, which was the pirate. Anyway, people, I would just like to thank you for the privilege of being on the board and hopefully serving CDTA in our continued efforts to make us one of the best transit companies in the entire country. And I thank you again and wish you all the very best luck. Hang on, one more thought. Oh, me? Oh, I think you're me.
don't, when I grew up, bankers were the people that you looked up to, that were community pillars. Art is the epitome of the banker that I grew up admiring. Honest, fair, knowledgeable. Sometimes we almost came to blows. I respected every word he ever said, and I learned something every meeting.
Thank you, Jim.
Anyone else? Before we go to lunch? There are no announcements. Upcoming meetings are the November 8th board retreat, and then our board meeting for December will be on December 13th. Motion to adjourn. Motion by Ms. Figueroa, second. Second. Mr. Schaefer, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Stand adjourned. Thank you very much. Lunch is